What's good, my YouTube friends and family and fellow Dragon Riders alike? Welcome back. And today, I'm here to give you guys my full review on the 2025 live-action adaptation of DreamWorks' How to Train Your Dragon, one of my all-time favorite childhood movies growing up as a kid, and still currently one of my favorite movies now. Now, I saw the movie on its opening night, June 13th, 2025, at around 3:25 p.m. where I live, and I gotta say, I really enjoyed myself with this movie. At first, when I came out of the theater, I thought of giving it a 10 out of 10, as you can see from my Instagram posts and my community tabs on YouTube. But after collecting all my thoughts, I decided to change my ratings because I was in the moment where I was like, this is the perfect live action adaptation of any movie, period. I was kind of agreeing with all the credits that people were giving the movie, but I really gotta sit down and collect my thoughts of what actually was different compared to the live action and animated version of How to Train Your Dragon. And I gotta say, I did find some things that I did not catch the first time when I saw the live action remake. Now, this video will contain spoilers for the live action How to Train Your Dragon, so for those of you who have not yet seen the film, wait until you see the film until you watch my review. But for those of you who did see it, please stick around. But for those of you who haven't seen it, I'm gonna give you a 5-second head start. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, done. Now, like I said, spoilers will be contained in this video. But with that being said, we're going to start off with the things that I didn't like and the things that I really did enjoy. So, with that being said, let the review begin. Had to turn on my AC because it was getting a little bit hot in here with the mask on and this costume. But anyway, like I said before, we're going to start off with the things that I didn't like, and then we're going to move on to the things that I did like and enjoyed. Now, the first thing, when it comes to the 2010 animated movie compared to the live action How to Train Your Dragon, there were 2 clips that were in the animated film that didn't make it to the final product of the live action remake. So, and I actually found out why these 2 clips weren't included through a website that I found on Google. So, let me tell you something. So, in the original How to Train Your Dragon, the 2010 animated film, after Hiccup is with the others in the dragon arena with the Zippleback, after he locks the Zippleback up in his cage, he says, okay, so are we done? Because I got some things I need to do, and yeah, see you tomorrow. And then we get the montage of Hiccup assembling all the gears and saddles for Toothless's tail. And then there's that one scene where Hiccup and Toothless are gliding in the air while tied down to the ground, and Hiccup is over here taking notes, and then they go back in the air a second time until the powerful gust of wind launches them back, and then Hiccup's string that's attached to his saddle is actually stuck on there, and there's no way to get it off. So at nighttime, Hiccup has to sneak Toothless into the blacksmith shop to try and fix the situation without anybody seeing Toothless. And that's when Astrid comes in and hears a bunch of loud noises coming from the blacksmith shop, and then Hiccup pops out and tries to tell Astrid hi or whatever, and she's like, I don't really care what normal people do, but you're acting weird. Well, weirder. And that's when Toothless accidentally lifts Hiccup off the ground and yanks him back inside, and Astrid opens the blacksmith doors to find nothing. Meanwhile, Toothless and Hiccup had already snuck out of the town, and then we cut to Stoic and the others returning from unsuccessfully finding the dragon's nest. Now, that part was not in the live action remake, but I'll explain why after I tell you what other part wasn't in the remake. So the next part is that after we get the beautiful scene of the test drive scene, after Toothless fires a plasma blast into the sky and fly right through it, we cut to Hiccup and Toothless lying down on a beach somewhere eating a bunch of fish, and then they're interrupted by a little group of dragons known as the Terrible Terror, who come in and try to eat their fish. And one of them actually was sneaky enough that even we didn't notice, had snuck underneath Toothless's pile of fish and tried to sneak one away, but then Toothless and the Terrible Terror were fighting back over the fish to who would get it, and Toothless obviously won, and then the Terrible Terror was upset, and then he tried to shoot a fireball at Toothless, but then as he was opening his mouth, Toothless just shot a little plasma blast inside the Terrible Terror's throat. And then that's when Hiccup says the line, "Not so fireproof from the inside, are you?" Then he gives him the fish. Terrible Terror calmly walks to Hiccup and lays down next to him like a little dog. And then that's when Hiccup pets the Terrible Terror and he says, "Everything we know about you guys is wrong." Now, that's another scene that wasn't in the final product for the live action How to Train Your Dragon. And I saw this on a website of Google explaining why those scenes weren't in the remake was because Dean DeBlois was also the director for the animated and live action of How to Train Your Dragon. He explains that the reason why, well, those scenes were filmed and edited, but he said that the reason why they didn't make it into the final product was because he felt like it would slow down the pacing of the movie. But at the same time, the movie is already 2 hours and 5 minutes long, so what's an extra 7 or maybe 5 more minutes of the movie gonna do? Like, I get, well, maybe not time lapse wise, but like story wise, like they gotta move the plot of the story along. Now, we didn't get those clips in the final product, but while I was reading on the website, they did say that whenever the live action How to Train Your Dragon will be coming to home video on DVD, they will probably release those clips for like behind the scenes or bonus scenes. You know how companies do that with their movies and stuff. So that's one thing I didn't really like, because with the Terrible Terrors, when Hiccup says "not so fireproof from the inside," that literally gives Hiccup the idea to help defeat the Red Death in the final battle, because in the animated movie, when Hiccup and Toothless are dive bombing down to get away from the Red Death, as the Red Death is literally opening up its mouth, Toothless literally turns back as he's diving and shoots a fireball inside the mouth of the Red Death. And that's when the wings start to tear open, the Red Death falls down to her death and just explodes. But Hiccup wouldn't have never gotten that idea if he hadn't had that scene with the Terrible Terrors in it. So how in the live action remake how was Hiccup able to figure that out if they never put that scene in the final project? But that's a few things that I didn't like about the live action. Also, there is another thing. Astrid, aka Nico Parker, was a little bit more rude to Hiccup at the beginning, like after their first scene when they were in the arena training with the Gronkle, and after Hiccup comes back from meeting Toothless or the Night Fury for the second time, we cut to Hiccup and the others and Gobbert in the Great Hall saying, "Where did y'all go wrong in the ring today?" And then that's when they say all that bunch of stuff. And as they were brought out to the Book of Dragons, and then Hiccup and Astrid are left alone in the Great Hall, and she's like saying a whole bunch of stuff, and Hiccup was like, "Maybe they're not as bad as we think they are." And they have a whole conversation, and then Astrid's saying stuff like, "I got my eyes set on your house. I'm gonna be chief. I'm gonna be the next chief." Like, damn, that's a lot more darker, that's more brutal than what I expected. And then she over here talk about getting more into Astrid's lore, saying, "I come from nothing. I don't take handouts. I don't have a father. I don't have a chief or a dad like you." Like, all that extra stuff. And damn, that actually is a lot more brutal than the animated version. But yeah, that's kind of like unexpected. And like, I like how everyone else is saying, "I'm gonna be chief," like Chief Tough Nut or something. But yeah, and also some of the scenes felt a little bit rushed, but not too rushed as it was in the animated film. But yeah, some scenes did feel rushed. And also the part where Toothless gets fed by Hiccup by that one fish, the scene where Toothless smiles in the animated film, after Hiccup swallows the fish, he smiles, and that's when Toothless snarls at Hiccup, looking at his smile, looking like he's never seen a smile before, and then that's when he starts to mimic the smile on Hiccup. Meanwhile, in the live action How to Train Your Dragon, he just smiles like he's always seen a smile. Like, that's kind of something that I was kind of disappointed by, but not too disappointed. But I'll let that slide. And hold on, let me think of anything else that I didn't like. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for what I didn't like about the live action How to Train Your Dragon. But now we're going to get into the things that I did like. Now, the CGI for the dragons were obviously spectacular, and there were some changes and scenes that was actually necessary and pretty good for what we got. Like, for example, in the animated film of How to Train Your Dragon, when after Hiccup reads through the Book of Dragons and finishes off with the page of the Night Fury, we cut to Stoic and the other Vikings heading into Helheim's Gate to try and find the dragon's nest, and then we don't actually get to see what they went through inside the misty fog, and then we only see a silhouette of a giant monstrous nightmare attacking their ship. And then we cut to Hiccup and the others training in the ring with the Deadly Natter. Meanwhile, in the live-action remake, we actually do get to see them go inside the fog, and we actually do get to see them get attacked by all different dragons, not just monstrous nightmares. There's, I think, like, Deadly Natters, monstrous nightmares, and there's also, like, some type of sea dragons. Like, I'm pretty sure I saw a few skrills in there, too, but I didn't see any lightning. But I wonder what those water dragons were in there, in the water. Maybe, like, thunder drums or something, but I don't know. But that was actually a pretty cool detail to see happen. All the Vikings were just falling out of the boat, and Stoic put out a story and said, "Turn back." And then that's when behind him was 3 Deadly Natters flying towards their ship, and then that's when we cut to Hiccup and the others training in the ring with the Deadly Natter. And I also like how in the live action remake compared to the animated film, they actually mentioned more of Hiccup's mom and how she was killed and taken away by dragons. And they actually mentioned her name, Valka, like maybe 4 or 3 times throughout the movie. And yeah, and this was almost a shot-for-shot remake with a few new lines put into it, but that's what actually I liked about it. And hold on, let me collect my thoughts more. I also liked how the final battle with the Red Death was portrayed. Like, when Stoic and the other Vikings had captured Toothless to force him to bring him to the dragon's nest, I like how they started leaving to Helheim's Gate in the daytime, and as they were going through the Helheim Gate area to try and get to the nest, it's already nighttime, and by the time they arrive, it's still nighttime. And then when they're ready to attack the volcano where the dragons are living, it's slowly going into the morning. Like, I actually like that. While in the animated film, it looks like all that was happening in one day, with them going to the dragon's nest and with Hiccup and the other Vikings training the dragons. Like, all that felt like that all happened in one day. Meanwhile, in the live action, we actually get to see it going from day to night to morning. Like, that's actually pretty good attention to detail. And the fucking music, let me tell you, John Powell hit it so good with this one. Like, it's almost the same way as they did in the 2010 version, but with just a tad bit differences. Like, you could definitely tell that there were some differences. Like, when the Red Death appears from outside of the volcano to face the Viking tribes, they actually used a music note that was actually in How to Train Your Dragon 2. Like, the scene where Drago uses his staff to call upon the Bewildered Beast to come to Hiccup and Toothless. Like, if you hear that music, that's the music that they used in the live-action How to Train Your Dragon. Like, I was not expecting that. I was like, ain't no way they really just used that music. I thought they were going to save that for the second film. Another thing I liked about the final battle with the Red Death is that I like how in the animated film, Hiccup when Toothless were just shooting plasma blasts at the Red Death's body, and I like how she didn't get pierced by the plasma blast at all. Meanwhile, in the live-action remake, every single time when Toothless shot a plasma blast, they would just break through the wings, and then he would just fly right through the holes every single time. And this happened about like several times until you could see all the different holes on her wings. And then as they're diving down to get away from the Red Death, when Toothless shoots the plasma blast from into the Red Death's mouth, in the animated film, she just crashes down onto the ground. While meanwhile, in the live-action remake, she actually crashes into the actual volcano, and then it actually explodes. Like, that is actually pretty kind of cool, not gonna lie. And I forgot to mention that one thing I found off is that during the montage with Hiccup assembling all of Toothless's gears and saddles. The scene where Toothless falls into the thing full of dragon nip, that's the stuff that Hiccups uses to tame the Gronkle in the ring. In the animated film, it was just a bunch of giant blades of green grass, while meanwhile, in the live action film, it was just a bunch of dandelions that every single time when Toothless was near it, like the whole field was full of them, every time he got near him, he just kept sneezing uncontrollably. And that's when Hiccup brought some dandelion leaves in the ring and just sprayed them across the face of the gruesome Gronkle, and that's when the Gronkle started to sneeze out of control. Like, I was honestly expecting for them to use like actual blades of grass like they did in the animated film, but this works too. Another thing I kind of liked about the fact with Snotlout and his dad Spitelout, during the final battle, Spitelout actually sees Snotlout on top of the Red Death poking his eyes, and he's like, "Is that my son?" And then later on, when Toothless and Hiccup are getting chased by the Red Death, Spitelout actually puts his hands on Snotlout's shoulders, acting like he's actually pretty proud of his son. While throughout the movie, when they came back from unsuccessfully finding the dragon's nest for the first time, Snotlout actually came to the docks where they were returning from, and then Spitelout just handed him a bag full of stuff to carry, and Snotlout was about to tell him all the stuff that had happened in the ring, but then all of a sudden he just disappeared, like he just wasn't there to hear his bullshit. Like, he just wanted to get out of there. It's like he's doing all this just to make his dad proud, and that's actually kind of good to see towards the end of the movie that he actually is proud of him. Now, as for the ring, like the arena area, they didn't have this in the animated film, but they said whoever wins the honor of top slayer will win the honor of killing their first dragon in front of the entire village. Now, they never gave that a specific name in the animated film. They just said they just said all that stuff about whoever wins the honor of killing their first dragon in front of the entire village and all that extra stuff. Like, at first I was kind of skeptical, but then as I was thinking about it more, the top slayer thing, that actually doesn't sound like a bad name. But at the same time, throughout their training in the arena, they're not slaying dragons, they're just practicing on how to actually kill one whenever they do. So that's not really top slayer. Yeah, I feel like they should have came up with a better name. I feel like it should have been a top not trainer, because that's basically what Hiccup and Toothless were doing. But anyway, I feel like they could have came up with a better name than top slayer, because they weren't really actually slaying dragons. Also, another thing I really admire the way how they portrayed Toothless's tail fin design. Like in the animated film, when his tail fin is all gone, like in the animated film, it's like it's just popped out of place and there's no residue of his previous actual tail fin. Meanwhile, during the scene when Hiccup attaches his brown leather tail fin onto Toothless, you can see that there actually was a little bit of bone and residue of where his real tail fin was during the crash. But that was actually a pretty cool touch of detail that I really, really liked. Also, another thing I found kind of slightly disappointing was the end credit song. So, if you look back at the animated film of How to Train Your Dragon back in 2010, the song that they used after they showed the logo, the name of the song was called Sticks and Stones, while meanwhile in the live action film, we got a completely different song. Like, it would have been nice to hear a newer version of the Sticks and Stones songs, but if you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend you go listen to it. It's actually a pretty good song. But anyways, that's pretty much it. And now we're getting into the cast part, the casting of the characters. So let's start with the main man, Gerard Butler, reprising his role as Stoic the Vast, aka Hiccup's dad. Now, if you don't know who Gerard Butler is, he also voiced Stoic in all 3 animated movies of How to Train Your Dragon, but he also did Stoic in not just the movies, he also did him in the TV shows and the games, I think. And it's honestly kind of amazing how he actually came back to reprise his character. Like, honestly, I could not picture anybody else doing Stoic besides Gerard Butler. He has that famous voice. Like, whenever he says a famous quote from How to Train Your Dragon, I'm like, yeah, that's Gerard Butler right there. He did an amazing job in both animated and live action. And the costume, if you go and look at the behind the scenes of the live action How to Train Your Dragon, you would see that he said throughout his reviews, he said the costume was hot. It was like hell, especially with the beard and stuff. The whole costume itself weighed about like 92 pounds, and he had to wear that for like 12 hours a day. Like, honestly, I'm surprised he was actually able to do that. And as for the role of Hiccup Haddock III, Mason Thames, he did an outstanding job portraying Hiccup. Honestly, I would have liked to have the original voice actor of Hiccup come back, but at the same time, he's a bit too old, and we need like a more younger version of Hiccup. Not to be offensive, but yeah, I feel like Mason Thames really did his good job as Hiccup. Like, he took his own spin on it, and during the scene with Stoic confronting Hiccup about finding out about Toothless after he couldn't kill the monstrous nightmare, I like how in the animated film they're like, they've killed hundreds of us, and Hiccup says, and we've killed thousands of them. And meanwhile in the live action it's like, they've killed hundreds of us, and Hiccup's like, and we've killed thousands of them, like in a aggressive tone. Like, that was actually pretty good acting, Mason Thames. And as for Astrid, played by Nico Parker, I feel like other than the brutal attitude she has towards Hiccup, I feel like she did an outstanding job. Like, the stunts that she did in the ring with all the dragons and stuff, she really wasn't she was really athletic with those moves and stuff. So yeah, I actually really like Nico Parker's Astrid, but I could look besides the fact that they didn't give her blonde hair, but over time, throughout seeing the trailers and previews and stuff, it kind of grew on me a little bit. Next up, we have Nick Frost as the role of Gobber. Now, I feel like in the live action one, he was a little bit more brutal at the beginning towards Hiccup in the blacksmith shop, while in the animated film, he was actually more understanding and willing to hear Hiccup out a little bit more compared to the live action one. Now, for Julian Dennison, who played the role as Fishlegs, I actually liked how he portrayed Fishlegs. Now, I haven't seen any of the other movies he's been in, but I have heard that he was in one of the other Godzilla movies, which I've never really seen before, but he did an outstanding job playing as Fishlegs. He was likable, and whenever Hiccup became more popular, I like how he was the more supportive one compared to the other kids we saw in the arena. But yeah, that's my opinion on the live action version of Fishlegs. Gabriel Howell as the role of Snotlout. I felt like Snotlout in this one was a bit more cocky and self-centered how he was compared to the original one. Like, in the live action, he really brings out the cockiness of Snotlout. He acts more like the Snotlout that we get in the animated TV shows and Race to the Edge compared to the one that we got in the 2010 animated film. But overall, he did a pretty good job doing his role as Snotlout. Now, Bronwyn James as the role of one of the twins, the female, Rough Nut. Now, honestly, she did okay in the movie, but at the same time, not to be rude, but I felt like they should have cast like a more younger teenager or more like a young adult to do both of the twins. I mean, she did okay for what it was, but at the same time, I felt like they could have done a little bit more better. I think it's just like the costume design, because hold on, let me show you something. So here is my action figure of Rough Nut from the live action How to Train Your Dragon, and here is my action figure of Tough Nut. Now, when you look at these two, you kind of can't really tell that they're twins, because Rough Nut has a more redhead hair, while Tough Nut has a more brownish hair. Like, and their outfits are almost similar, but not really. And honestly, I kind of wouldn't really see these being the twins, but honestly, that's my opinion. But yeah, that is my opinion on Tough Nut in the live action How to Train Your Dragon. Harry Trevelyan, who played Tough Nut in How to Train Your Dragon, he was okay too, but at the same time, he looked a little not to be rude on age, but he looked a little too old. Like, I kind of agree with what Hiccup, aka Mason Thames, said at the beginning of their in session in the ring. How Hiccup commented saying, "Aren't you two like a little old to be here?" And Fish Legs over here saying they flunked out of dragon training a few times, and they're like, it's called being held back, as in too valuable to let go of. But yeah, I felt like they could have done a little better with casting the twins. I feel like they should have been a little bit more younger. Peter Serafinovich, who played Snotlout's dad, aka Spite Lout. Now, he barely got that much screen time, but for what we got from him in live action, he did a pretty decent job. But yeah, since he didn't have that much screen time, I can't really say too much other than he did an okay job as Spite Lout. But that is pretty much it for the casting part. And there's one thing I kind of forgot to mention that I didn't like. Now, in the animated film of How to Train Your Dragon back in 2010, the famous quote from that movie, I mean, we didn't really hear this quote in any other How to Train Your Dragon movies, but we've only heard it in the 2010 version, where Hiccup and Stoic are the only two people who say this. They say the lines, "We're Vikings, it's an occupational hazard." Meanwhile, in the How to Train Your Dragon 2025 remake, we didn't get that line at all. Not from Hiccup, not even from Stoic. I also like how they did Goofy. I don't really remember who voiced or did Goofy in the live action version. I looked it up online and I couldn't really find who actually did Goofy, but she was actually a pretty good character for what it was. I like how Stoic actually asked Goofy, do we have an actual chance of finding the dragon's nest before the ice sets in? And she just pulls out a small bag full of bones and does something. She says, that means yes, basically. And then that's when all the Vikings from the Great Hall starts going to the docks and getting the ships ready to set sail. But hold on, let me try to think of a few other things. If not, I think this might where we end off the video. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, there is an end credit scene, but I was kind of confused on what this actually meant, because it felt like this was just a copy, a reused frame from when Hiccup was looking over the Book of Dragons on the Night Fury page. He puts his drawing of Toothless down on the page and he just taps his finger on the book, and then that's the end of the end credit scene. But I was kind of confused. But yes, there is going to be a second live action remake of How to Train Your Dragon 2, which will be soaring into theaters on June 11th, 2027. So I'm definitely going to be seeing that. But I really enjoyed this movie. There were a little bit of criticisms, but majority of the movie was actually pretty good. It stayed true to the actual animated version, unlike Disney does it with them changing their scripts and changing certain characters, like how they did with Jumba and Lilo and Stitch, which I still have not seen, by the way, but I'm not planning to, so y'all can spoil me with the Lilo and Stitch stuff all you want. I've seen clips of it, but I did not like what they did with the Lilo and Stitch. Also, Lion King, it was okay, but I still didn't really like how they changed certain things. Like, if you're going to make a remake, make it true to the actual animated movie. Like, take the live action Mulan, for example. That shit was fucking garbage. Like, there was no Mushu, and a bunch of random shit was just thrown out of the fucking bloom. Like, Disney, what were you thinking? Like, no, go back to the fucking drawing board. Honestly, for what DreamWorks did as an experiment for a live action remake, this is actually pretty good. So that being said, I know I said that I rated How to Train Your Dragon 2025 a 10 out of 10, but after actually sitting down and collecting my thoughts, I decided to give How to Train Your Dragon's live action remake a solid 9 out of 10. So it was actually pretty good. Meanwhile, the animated version gets a 9.5. So almost right next to the original. They changed certain things, but those certain things were absolutely necessary for what we've got. So if you're a fan of How to Train Your Dragon, I definitely would 100% recommend this live action remake. And even if you don't like live action remakes, I would definitely give this one a chance. Like, certain things are worth trying. Like, you gotta at least try everything once. And if you don't like it, then it's fine by me. And you can listen to other critics and reviewers online, and you can still have your own opinion, but this is just what I think. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed my review. If you did, then be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and click the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos I upload for you guys to enjoy on this channel. And if you guys would like to follow me on my social media accounts, the links will be in the description down below, as well as the link to my second YouTube channel, so make sure you go and follow me there. And to make sure that you watch my full review from beginning to end, then make sure you comment 5 dragon emojis and 5 fire emojis. And also, I will probably most likely be seeing the live action How to Train Your Dragon movie again more than once. So I've already seen it by myself, so I might see it with my mom and sister. My mom, oh no, not my mom. Well, my mom and by myself, my mom and my sister and a few of my cousins, and me and my dad's side of the family, maybe. And I think that might be it. So maybe 4 or 5 more times I'll probably see the movie again. And hopefully other movie theaters have different popcorn buckets or merchandise that I could probably get my little hands on. But anyway, with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. And until then, peace out, my fellow Dragon Riders.